So a few days ago, Dave Cullen of Computing Forever tweeted out, "I'm starting to believe that with all of this online censorship, the graffiti of the future will be IP addresses written on walls in chalk. And I think this is more prescient than he realised, because the censorship is already here. The world's oldest neo-Nazi website, Stormfront, is shut down. Why? Because the company that hosts the domain revoked it following complaints that it promotes hatred and is linked to dozens of murders. I don't know whether it's linked to dozens of murders, but I am sure it promotes hatred. But even then, that is their choice. My recommendation to you would be not to read it. But anyway, okay, so Stormfront is shut down. Let's assume that it is linked to dozens of murders. That's, in my opinion, a legitimate reason. If a website is actually inspiring people to go out and commit murders, fine. You know, I don't agree with incitement to violence. I don't want people to be killed. Okay, that's not an illegitimate target in my opinion. Does it stop there? Of course it doesn't. The Daily Stormer, as I made a video on previously, has been forced to retreat to the dark web. Now, I'm not aware that the Daily Stormer is related to any murders, but okay, they're pretty much the same thing, so why not? Because I'm not a white supremacist, so I didn't speak out. But then you get something like The Rebel. Now, I'm sure that there are many people who have many issues with Ezra Levant, and not because of his heritage. He seems to be somewhat of a suspicious chap, but that doesn't mean his website should just be arbitrarily shut down. Ezra Levant spoke to Reuters and said that the domain provider completely disabled its internet registration, making the site inaccessible to many users around the world. Apparently they were scrambling to restore the services, and I'm sure by now they've found another domain provider. But the reason is why? Because you can hardly accuse The Rebel of being a white supremacist site. It's run by a Jewish man who employs many non-white women and men and just various people, and they've spoken publicly against the alt-right and white supremacy. They seem to be a traditional conservative website. So why would they be pulled? And as Ian Miles Chung points here, in a related move, MailChimp and Eventbrite cancelled Milo Yiannopoulos' accounts for supposedly violating the terms of service. The thing is, this would be a lot more believable if it wasn't coming hot on the heels of the moves by GoDaddy and various other Silicon Valley providers to essentially hunt down and eradicate the web presence of people with political views that are extreme. Personally, I don't think Milo's views are actually that extreme. If you actually sit down and listen to what he has to say, he's actually quite tepid and middle of the road. He's just really opposed to identitarianism, and, well, we're being dominated by that philosophy at the moment, which is why they're so terrified of the white supremacists. If it's okay to judge people by their race, how is it the white supremacists are wrong? But either way, the Rebels website was terminated without any explanation, which I find to be rather ominous, because it seems that it could happen to anyone at any time, even if they're not white supremacists, which Milo and Ezra Levant are not. And then we come to Robert Spencer and Jihad Watch, which was dropped from PayPal after immense public outcry, despite the fact I think Jihad Watch does some remarkably useful work, as in cataloguing and keeping track of jihadi activity around the world. Jihad Watch is not a website that simply blames all Muslims, or if it is, I have yet to see it. It is run by a Jewish man who is concerned with the increasing jihadi presence around the world and online, and I can completely see why he's concerned. You don't see Twitter or PayPal or any of this publicly dropping jihadi websites or shutting down jihadi accounts or anything of the sort. It's only the extreme right, and not even the extreme right in many cases. And honestly, I think it's just a matter of time before anyone who speaks about any of these issues is on the chopping block next. Especially when someone like Philip deFranco makes a video about concerns that YouTube is not doing a good enough job understanding the context with news videos and channels, and then 10 hours later he has his video demonetized and confirmed by manual review, which means someone at YouTube saw Philip deFranco and said, you know what, put this on the blacklist. We've seen videos going to the limited state, with Black Pigeon Speaks having 2 of his videos, which were not hateful, although they were controversial, being put into the state, as well as videos by Jared Taylor on the differences between race and IQ. I looked at the sources, it looks like it's academically sourced. I'm not saying I agree with it, but what I'm saying is that he's making an argument, and we should be refuting that argument. And so we finally come to myself. I was suspended from Facebook, from posting on Facebook for 3 days after I refuted some Nazis. I posted, if your answer to the accusation of racial subjectivism is, that's what a Jew would say, then you're admitting your own guilt. I was refuting Nazis, and I was suspended from Facebook for 3 days. Refuting Nazis apparently violates Facebook community standards. I have been suspended from Twitter, of course, after spending time arguing with the alt-right, and so I think that what they're saying is you're not allowed to talk about this at all. Rather ominous, in my opinion. And I do think that the net that they are casting is going to widen. I think more and more channels will find themselves in the position where they are being censored by the powers that be for merely engaging with these ideas, which is worrisome because I agree with some of the more open-minded articles that we're seeing around that we need to start befriending neo-Nazis. Bethany Mandel here gives examples of how she has effectively deprogrammed neo-Nazis by simply befriending them, and other examples of black people and Jewish people doing the same, and you can deprogram these people. They are not fucking robots. They need to be talked out of what they believe, and it's honestly the only way I think of doing anything to reduce the numbers of these people. Not that the numbers of these people is particularly startlingly high, but if you want to make sure they don't exist, that's the best way to go about it. Unlike Noah Barron here, who's absolutely, no, we should not make friends with Nazis, and just skipping to his conclusion, any number of neo-Nazis, no matter how few, is too many. So what should we do? Should we exterminate them? Do you think that's the sort of thing that good people do? Exterminate other people? On the basis of their beliefs? Any number of neo-Nazis, no matter how few, is too many and a threat to all minorities. How? How is a tiny handful of Nazis a threat to all minorities? Unless you think suddenly a country that has been primed to think in racial terms is going to flip and decide maybe they've got a point. Maybe we are seeing oppression of white people. Maybe this is being done by minorities and Jews, and maybe something needs to be done. I don't think that's going to happen. But maybe you're worried about it, because maybe that's how you think. And maybe when you hear neo-Nazi arguments, you think, well, they have a point. Do you see the problem? The problem is thinking along racialized lines. If you want to break groups into racial groups, then you're going to end up with people who flip from left to right, like Baked Alaska. There are various other examples as well. You see them coming out of the woodwork. I used to be part of Antifa, but now I'm a white nationalist. If you don't want people to go down that road, then you have to show them that white nationalism and, well, racial collectivism is not a stable political system, and honestly, I don't think it is. And it's certainly not the political system that came out on top in the 20th century, is it? So why the hell are we dragging ourselves back to a retrograde version of what we had established? Sorry, I don't think it's the way forward. I don't think it's productive. I don't think it's going to solve any of our problems. And I certainly think that the people involved are going to be persecuted along the way, and they are. So there must be another solution that isn't going to persecute minorities, that isn't going to persecute people for their beliefs, and that isn't going to lead us into a racial civil war. Maybe I'm just too much of an optimist.